All right, so the big story over the last 24 hours has been that many advertisers have now dropped Laura Ingraham's show on Fox News. And the reason they dropped Laura Ingraham's show is because she tweeted something out yesterday, which we discussed, in which she suggested, I'm going to quote her directly, she said, David Hogg rejected by 4 colleges to which he applied and whines about it. And we played the clip of David Hogg, who is the Parkland shooting survivor, who's obviously made a name for himself saying pretty vicious things on television about Second Amendment advocates, Dana Lash, GOPers. He's been pretty brutal to everyone who disagrees with him. And he's wanted to have it both ways, David Hogg. And again, this is not a criticism of his right to speak. Obviously, he has the right to speak, and he should speak however much he wants. And this isn't a criticism of his status as a survivor. Obviously, something awful that never should happen to anybody of decency happened to David Hogg, and that's awful and unforgivable. But he's now in the political debate, and that means that there's some slings and arrows that come with the political debate. I know this, okay? When I was 17 years old, the same age as David Hogg, I started writing a syndicated column, and I got clubbed about the ears for it. And a lot of that was deserved, because guess what? At 17, you don't know everything, and sometimes your perspectives are wrong. And if you join in the political debate, then it is open season on your politics. And by the way, it's not to be gauche. Like, insults are bad. People saying silly, stupid things about you, that's nasty. But it does happen on a relatively regular basis. Okay, for years, I was called the Virgin Ben in the left-wing press. Okay, that is not a joke. From the time I was 17, there were people who were calling me the Virgin Ben because obviously I was a nerd who had never had sex. And I was proud about the fact that I hadn't had sex, and I was a virgin until I was married. But I was called the Virgin Ben. Not once did I ever call for the people who were calling me the Virgin Ben to lose their advertising base. And my retaliatory response was always, okay, let's talk about ideas, or you're an idiot. Okay, that's the way that politics works. David Hogg, however, called immediately for an advertiser boycott on Laura Ingraham, and all these advertisers complied. And a lot of advertisers comply with this stuff because they're afraid that they don't really want the controversy. They're concerned that any controversy associated with their product is going to hurt their sales. The reality is these boycotts don't really work very well. When they tried an actual boycott against Chick-fil-A, for example, it failed immediately. And I remember just a few months ago, when Keurig Coffee was bullied into dropping Sean Hannity as an advertiser. Sean fought back, and Keurig reinstated their advertisement within like a week. So all this talk about advertisers really feeling the impact of politics, it's just not true. People don't not buy products because they don't like the programs that advertisers advertise on, right? Secondary boycotts generally do not work. That's worth noting. But one of the questions I want to ask here is, what is this boycott against Laura really about? She's come out and apologized now. So if you said that it was about civility, if you said it was about decency, she shouldn't have said what she said. I don't think she should have said what she said either. Right? I said that yesterday on the show. But if you think this boycott is about civility or decency, you got another thing coming, because now she's apologized. Okay, status quo ante restored, right? We're all supposed to be cordial with the Parkland survivors, which we should be. We should be decent with the Parkland survivors, which we should be. I've been very focused on doing that throughout this entire horrible mess that's happened in the aftermath of an even more horrible incident, obviously. But decency was restored, right? Well, not right, because after Laura Ingraham apologized, David Hogg said, I want to continue to boycott Laura Ingraham. Right? He said, I want to continue to boycott Laura Ingraham. So here is Hogg rejecting Laura Ingram's apology.
That they cannot push us around, especially when all we're trying to do here is save lives. And when people try to distract, like Laura's trying to do right now, from what the real issue here is, which is gun violence in America, it's not only sad, it's just wrong. From a journalistic standpoint, I would say that she needs to be more objective and needs to stand down, because I am not the issue here. The issue needs to be gun violence in America. But what she's trying to do is to distract from that, and I hate it.
Okay, first of all, I seriously doubt that David Hogg hates the attention. I think that, when it comes to him pushing a boycott that's successfully working, I think, against Laura Ingram's advertisers, I really doubt that David Hogg laments that. And as far as who's taking us off focus on the gun control stuff, none of this has to do with gun control. Laura shouldn't have said what she said. Hogg shouldn't have made an issue out of it. It's really like none of this really has to do with gun control or saving lives. Pretty clearly, I don't know what he means when he says that Laura should be more objective. She's obviously conservative, and she says so. Even Allison Camerata jumps in at that point and says, well, she's not an objective host. That's not him just rejecting her apology. It's clip 3 where Hogg rejected Ingram's apology. He said, I 100% agree. An apology is an effort just to save your advertisers is not enough. I will only accept your apology only if you denounce the way your network has treated my friends and I in this fight. It's time to love thy neighbor, not mudsling at children. Okay, so this tweet is really telling. Okay, what Hogg is doing here is wildly inappropriate. First of all, he doesn't have to accept her apology. You never have to accept an apology. But if we're going to pretend that this is some sort of principled non-acceptance of an apology, it is clearly not. Right? When he says that, he's thanking all of the advertisers that are dropping Laura Ingraham because he likes the fact that he is wielding this sort of power against Ingraham for engaging in what is, by any sort of political standard, rather mild stuff. Right? He's tweeting at her, hashtag shut up and be objective. And be objective. Go back to the original tweet for just a second, the first one. Right? So when he says here, it's time to love thy neighbor, not mudsling at children. Two things that David Hogg is saying here. Again, none of this is an attack on Hogg as a person, right? Hogg might be a fine, upstanding person, although I think that his behavior here is really questionable, and I think that his behavior for the last couple of weeks in labeling all of his enemies evil has been really quite vile. But maybe he's a good person. Okay, he seems like a smart kid. Okay, but this last line is time to love thy neighbor, not mudsling at children. Once you step out in the public debate and you start speaking publicly on issues of consequence, you no longer get to hide behind the title child. Like Kyle Kashuv, who is a classmate of Hogg's in a younger class than David Hogg, right? I don't think that Kyle's not a senior. I think he's a sophomore, right? Kyle, or a junior. Kyle came out, he said, you don't get to pretend you're a child and then at the same time say that you're an adult who ought to be ruling the world with regard to these policies. And when it comes to David Hogg saying you ought to love thy neighbor and that he's standing up for civility, again, I'm not defending Laura's comment. I'm not saying she shouldn't have apologized. I am saying that David Hogg pretending to be an advocate of civility is pretty astonishing. And launching a boycott on behalf of civility as David Hogg is pretty astonishing, because here are all the things that David Hogg has said just in the last 2 weeks about his political opponents. This is clip 10.
Pathetic that want to keep killing our children. They could have blood from children spattered all over their faces and they wouldn't take action, because they'll still see those dollar signs. I'm going to start off by putting this price tag right here as a reminder for you guys to know how much Marco Rubio took for every student's life in Florida. $1.05. Okay.
I mean, do you think that's unnecessarily provocative?
No, I think it's not enough I don't think it's even provocative enough. When your old parents, like, I don't know how to send an iMessage, and you're just like, give me the phone. Sadly, that's what we have to do with our government, because our parents don't know how to use a democracy, so we have to. What Dana's trying to do, I believe she's the CEO of the NRA, she's trying to distract people. If you listen to her talk,
she's a national spokeswoman for the NRA.
Exactly. She owns these congressmen. She can get them to do things. It's just she doesn't care about these children's lives. It just makes me think, what sick are out there that want to continue to sell more guns, murder more children, and honestly just get reelected? What type of person are you when you want to see more money than children's lives? What type of person does that? If you can't get elected without taking money from child murderers, why are you running? With Rick Scott, it's like, when I get elected to Senate, we're not going to let that happen. And that's the great thing about it, because those aren't going to get reelected. When you start hearing from your political aides that there's a load of angry future voters, you start to worry a little bit.
Love thy neighbor. Okay, I'm sorry. You don't get to play the love thy neighbor card when this has been your shtick for the last couple of weeks. Okay, you really don't. It just doesn't wash. So what's the boycott really about? The boycott, of course, is about politics. It's about political opponents of Laura's who see an opening and now they're going to club her, right? Because this is how Media Matters operates. This is how the left operates with their boycott tactics, that if somebody makes a boo-boo, then no apology is sufficient, and they will jump in and they will attempt to remove your advertising base. And you can see this from the way that the media continue to treat this entire issue. So over on MSNBC, right, the MSNBC panel says that Laura Ingraham is she's losing advertisers over her casual cruelty, right? MSNBC is jumping on this because MSNBC is a Fox News competitor. This is all political. To pretend this is not political is to ignore reality, obviously.
And you don't want to be in business with Laura Ingraham because of her easy and casual cruelty that she inflicts out on people on a daily basis. And again, to John Heilman's point, what you see is another example of an adult acting terribly.
And what you're seeing here is what the media have done, and they've been doing this since the shooting, and I object to it. What they've done is they've taken these kids who really don't necessarily know anything about gun control. They haven't evidenced tremendous knowledge about the issue, and they are using them as stand-ins for their own opinion. And then if those kids' opinions are attacked, the media jumps out in front and says, hey, how dare you attack these kids? And the media is pretty much admitting this, right? Brian Stelter on CNN says, listen, we're not treating these kids as we would treat any other guest on our program. We're not calling them when they say things that are blatantly factually erroneous, right? He was questioned about this by S.E. Cupp on CNN Headline News. This is clip 11. Here's Stelter explaining, yeah, we don't ask them real questions. We just have them come out and trot out their political point of view. And then if anybody attacks their political point of view, then we basically say those people are bad people.
When I was interviewing David Hogg only 10 days after the massacre, there were a few times I wanted to jump in and say, let's correct that fact.
That's so interesting.
Let's make sure we're more. And one of the times I did, and other times I did not. And, you know, there's always that balance.
Yes,
how many
it's a
times
very
you're going to
tricky
interrupt.
thing, because this is a victim on one hand who is entitled to his own emotional response.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as news people, when we hear something demonstrably untrue,
right,
you want to go in and say, but
when he
that's
called
not right.
Dana Lash, the NRA CEO, interrupted and corrected that. But there are other times when I think all of us can agree. Any of these students, any of these parents, we want everybody to be as well informed as we can about the contours of this debate.
Okay, but you didn't stop this kid when he was out there saying that Dana Lash ran that she ran Congress, right? You didn't stop, and nobody, Alison Camerata didn't stop David Hogg when he went on the air and he called everybody who opposed him akin to a child murderer, right? This is what CNN has done. This is what CNN's been awful on this. I said this directly to Brian Stelter last week, right? This is nothing that I haven't said publicly on CNN to CNN. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in just a second because I think the ultimate example of this was Alison Camerata this morning on CNN. I will show it to you. It's pretty egregious. And again, this isn't even about Hogg anymore, right? Hogg is a kid who is using a platform that's being given to him by the media, and he seems like a smart kid. He seems like a motivated kid. He also seems like somebody who's saying things that are deeply immoral, and the media are using him as a prop in order to say those things. And I think that the media are the really problematic people here. I think it's quite disgusting what they're doing. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at Wink. So, do you need a drink? Because I do. Is CNN. And the worst example on CNN has been Alison Camerata, who's just been awful on this. She's had on Survivor after Survivor, all on the left. She wouldn't have on Kyle Kashuv because Kyle Kashuv once tweeted out that CNN was fake news. Well, speaking of fake news, here was Alison Camerata questioning David Hogg this morning about all of this college hubbub. So remember, this whole thing started with him going on TMZ and talking about being rejected by 4 colleges and handling it pretty decently, I thought, except at the very end he said that if colleges don't want to help us out, well, we're still changing the world. The implication being the colleges were rejecting him for his political viewpoint, which is just asinine. Okay, colleges, I promise you, the colleges that rejected David Hogg did so long before this happened. Okay, right now, if David Hogg were to reapply, probably half the colleges that didn't let him in would let him in. Now, Hogg said, I mean, he said in the interview, I believe, that he has a 4.1 GPA and a 1270 SAT, which is a fine score. That is not the average score of the people getting into UCLA. I know that my sister didn't get into UCLA, and she had well into the 1300s and about a 4.1 GPA. So, again, there are plenty of reason-neutral rationales for why Hogg didn't get into these particular colleges, and it has nothing to do with him being stupid or anything. He's not stupid. He's obviously, again, for the 1,000th time, a smart kid. But there are lots of reasons why you wouldn't get into UCLA with a 1270 average. I mean, with a 1270 SAT. In fact, I want to look up right now the average SAT score for UCLA admittees. It is certainly not a 1270. Right now, let's see. So let's see. I'm looking up prepscholar.com. So according to their admission statistics, the average SAT score composite at UCLA is 1370. Right, a full 100 points higher than David Hogg. So that's why he didn't get into UCLA. It's a very selective college. Doesn't mean he's not going to go to college. He will go to college. But watch this clip where Alison Camerata demonstrates that now the media views these kids as cult figures. Cult figures, right? It's not, if anybody crosses David Hogg, it's not because maybe there's a reason that they did so, like a value neutral, they don't hate David Hogg reason. It must be because they hate David Hogg and hate his agenda. I mean, this clip from Camerata just says so many things in so little time. Let's play it.
David, I am stunned that 4 colleges rejected you. What kind of dumb colleges don't want you? I mean, you've taken the country by storm.
Okay, this is insane. Okay, what kind of dumbass colleges would reject you? How about colleges that were like just looking at his scores before any of this started? But again, treating these kids as totems is what this is all about. This is all about treating these kids as totems and then suggesting that anyone who crosses these kids must be cast out in sackcloth and ashes, even though they're UCLA administrators who are leftists. Okay, I know the administrators at UCLA. They are leftists. This is so silly. By the way, if you think that David Hogg is a victim of the colleges, forget about what happened at Parkland. If you think that a white middle-class kid, upper middle-class kid from Parkland, Florida, a cis white male, right, a white privileged kid, according to, let's put it this way, if the shooting had not taken place in Parkland, and they were talking right now about the admissions for this guy, would they really be suggesting that the colleges had discriminated against him? Or would they suggest that if he got into UCLA, he'd be taking a spot that better go to an ethnic kid with a bad background, with a hard background? Apparently, cis privilege goes right out the window as soon as a political agenda is at stake. This is about the media. It really isn't about these kids. These kids are saying what they're saying because they're on camera and because they're kids. I don't blame them for that. I do blame the media for making them totems that can never be crossed under any circumstances. Okay, so yesterday, I had the opportunity to sit down with Thomas Sowell. And I wanted to bring that to you because it was really cool. Thomas Sowell is, of course, one of the foremost economists in America. He's a terrific thinker. And more importantly, Thomas Sowell is, I think, a a real ethical guide for a lot of folks because he thinks about issues rationally. He has a brand new book out. I had a chance to sit down with him yesterday. Here's what